friends and brothers. This is Justin Jones with Masonic Improvement and joined with my co-host, Dennis Yates. We are going to do a short series. We're going to look at our top 3 videos that Dennis and I have agreed on that are both of our favorites. And we're going to do a quick summary and then we'll have the video. So this is to bring more recognition to videos that we think either are outstanding or that we thoroughly enjoyed or that just need more attention, because there's great content and they need love.
These are the top 3, the goats in Masonry.
I love it. It's a great title. Ooh. The third video in our trilogy of favorite Masonic improvement videos should be pretty obvious once you actually start watching it. Once we actually unveil it, be like, oh yeah, that was a really good video. And if you haven't watched it, it's going to blow you away. This particular brother, he has been somewhat of a mentor to me, even though he probably doesn't know it. He's been a mentor to me for several years before he and I even met. I look up to him with just a huge amount. And in fact, he and I share a mentor. I didn't realize this till years later, but one of my other Masonic mentors was his mentor when he first came to the fraternity. His lodge is actually probably what I would consider one of the best examples of how a lodge can turn around and become successful. And so when I visited his lodge, it became almost like something that I compare other lodges to. And this was like 2 years ago I went there, and I still do it to this day. So this is a fantastic video.
I think that the biggest value you're going to get from this is knowing that you're talking to a marketing executive. You're not just talking to a brother that, and no offense against any brothers out there, but you're talking about a brother that has to function on a high level every day in everything he does. And so not only, and with any lodge, it's not just him that made it this way, of course, and he'll tell you that too, that it was a group effort, and they still to this day hold each other accountable higher than any other lodge I've ever seen. It's just amazing to me, the strength and ability of this lodge. And really, you think that they're more, if you look at their lodge room, you think they're more esoterically minded lodge, which they are. Don't get me wrong. However, they do everything else. They do the fundraisers. They do the other managerial type education. They do guest speakers. They do all the stuff that they do. Excellent ritual. They do all the stuff, including guarding the West Gate better than most in Texas. And I would say that they would probably rival most in the northern United States. I would say that that's very possible. And they're not only successful with what they're doing, but they're consistently growing in doing that. It's a proven model that works. If there's ever been one, this is one. And that's because you've got a bunch of high functioning people that are a part of that lodge that make that happen. Every one of the members of this lodge are extremely focused in what they do at work, as well as what they do in Masonry. And you can tell with the results. And yes, he's been a friend of mine for many years. The first time I got all giddy over him is seeing him stand up at Grand Lodge and just piss everybody off. And half the lodge was upset on this side, and half of the lodge was extremely happy on this side. And man, I live within that chaos, because that's democracy. That is debate. That is what makes us so functional in our dysfunction, right? That's what, we're able to find the best of the best in everybody by challenging each other to be better. And his resolution didn't even make it that year, but it was one that caused a lot of discussion and made everybody think. So it made us all better walking away from that moment. And that's why he's our number 3. He doesn't have the highest number of views. He's one of the higher ones, but it's not the highest, but that's why he's our number 3, because no matter when you're with him, there's always a good conversation.
It's also worth pointing out that he was the keynote speaker at our summit in Corpus Christi in 2023. His lodge is a model of exactly what Masonic Improvement stands for. So we are proud to share Unlocking the Potential of Your Masonic Lodge with Brother Kyle Wahlquist. Enjoy. Hello, friends and brothers. This is Justin Jones with Masonic Improvement. I am joined with my co-host, Brother Dennis Yates. How are you doing, Dennis?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing even better tonight. We have a special guest on that, pretty soon he's going to be one of our Purple Jacket members that have been on so many times that they get a special jacket. And no, it's not the kind of purple jacket you're thinking about. No.
You had me worried.
Right. So, before I tell you who this person is, and most of you know anyways that are watching, but I just want to say that since I have gotten on to Texas Freemasonry, Kyle Wahlquist has not had to post as much because I've stirred enough pots to where he doesn't have to. But that is what intrigued me about him, and that's what made me grow in respect of him and love him as a friend and a brother. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Kyle. He is a member of the membership committee for the Grand Lodge of Texas. So that of which he speaks is superior knowledge. And also he's very sharp in his profession in marketing and online. Well, I'll let you explain that, because that's the gist of my understanding of it, because I've got a finite little brain, and so we'll let you push it from there. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dennis and Justin. I really appreciate it. I'll give a background. I don't talk about my profession too much to most people, but Masonic profession first. Been a Mason for 15 or 16 years now. Joined Hillcrest right out of college, and been very active with the Grand Lodge over the past 10 years or so. Served as vice chairman and chairman of multiple committees. Now, just assisting on the membership committee, but served as chairman for the past 2 years on that committee. Professionally, started my career around the same time that I joined a lodge, or Hillcrest Lodge rather, and started with a little .com that started booming 4,000% year over year, and eventually got bought by Amazon. We did not have like a huge marketing budget in that space. We had a business model, and we just had kind of a way to work the technology and the marketing that really worked in helping to grow the brand and grow the market exposure, and ultimately get us to the point where we were acquired. From there, I got picked up into Best Buy corporate around the same time that the recession was starting to go full steam, and that they had acquired a company, and I helped them develop that company into their back-end logistics systems and their online capabilities, developing sales and marketing channels for them. Meanwhile, around the same time, also becoming worshipful master of Hillcrest at some point in there. And so I was really seeing a lot with inside business and how some of these larger companies were thinking about growth. Obviously different growth model than what we needed with inside Freemasonry, but seeing some overlaps in how we could approach our challenges there. And then from there, my project was fairly successful. Got through the recession, my position got pulled up to Minnesota. That was a little bit too cold for me, and I didn't want to leave my Texas brothers. So started my own consultancy for a few years, worked with Redbox DVD as well as a few other smaller clients, running strategy for them, and then ultimately found home with the firm that I'm with now. I'm now, been talking a lot today, as I normally do for anybody who knows me. But now I'm principal of a global consulting firm that's been growing exponentially over the past 4 or 5 years or so, and I lead our marketing services with inside that, and really focus on how to grow major, Fortune 50 brands, finding significant opportunities for them. So that's a short background on me, and I'll let you guys kind of dictate where this conversation goes from there.
It strikes me with your background that you're the kind of person, if you're talking about how an organization should be growing, people should probably be listening to you.
Yeah. Well, I probably wouldn't disagree with you there. But yeah, it's interesting. My fascination around this has been so intertwined with Freemasonry. In fact, a lot of my early learnings, they weren't always as clear how connected they were. And so I was kind of like learning things with inside Freemasonry, not, only the work and things like that, but how the administration, the different components of leading a lodge, like everything that went into it. As well as then in my professional career, learning, strategic frameworks and technologies and marketing strategies and so forth. And so over time, these things really just started to emerge as like, oh, there's a lot of similarities here. And I think as we've grown more into a digital society, with inside our membership, those two things have become more and more commonplace, right? I mean, when I first joined, we were regularly having conversations on how most of our guys didn't have email addresses, and we couldn't use that as a valid form of communication. Where now, I'm sure it's still true to some extent, but as we can see from Texas Freemasons, most people have Facebook accounts who are active and are able to stay engaged and stay active. And most of the people who are joining now are going to be sub 45, and in the cities, you may have sub 35. So obviously of the millennial age group, which is slightly younger than my age group today, and so they are much more technically prevalent. And as I'm sure we're all aware, on even different social platforms than what us, old guys in the Gen X group, associate with. So
you mentioned how there's go ahead, Dennis.
I just wanted to say just real quick that we need to circle back to the business model later on in this conversation, because I was thinking about that today, as a matter of fact, the business model of Freemasonry versus the, a regular, strategic business model of a company. Yeah. So I'd like to circle back to that for sure.
I was going to bring that up right now. Just because you mentioned the parallels between looking at business models and administration and leadership and Freemasonry, in that there's so many parallels, yet you don't see a lot of people stepping up into that niche in the fraternity. If someone wants to come and they say, I want to join, I want to get a certificate and learn all the ritual, sure, there's a place for you that, and we encourage that. Or if you just, hey, I want to fry the best fish in Texas. Hey, there's a place for you to do that. However, someone's like, I really think we should start applying a business models to this organization so that it grows substantially and we can keep going for generations.
Or we at least keep the doors open.
Yeah, like whoa, we don't do that kind of stuff here. And it's unfortunate because we need the ritual, and there's several different aspects, niches in Freemasonry, and we need those it's what makes us Freemasonry. But if we can't start making intelligent business decisions today, like our forefathers did before us, to actually build these buildings, then we won't have anything to leave to future generations. It doesn't matter how many people have a certificate in the state if there's no lodges for them to confer degrees or do any of the work at.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The demographics are changing, not only with inside membership, but also lodge structures, which will affect Grand Lodge structures as well. They're already starting to. I mean, our laws today are fairly significantly different in approaches from what would have been acceptable, 20 or 30 years ago, with regards to certain portions of how we handle the work and, things like that, which I'm not going to go into in this format. But I think, anybody who's close to it knows at least ideas of what I'm talking about here. So, yeah, things are changing. As far as getting back around to the business model, this may be a good teaser for kind of one of the reasons we're here, right? This is going to be one of the things that we're going to be talking about, in that conference that you guys are so graciously putting on for this jurisdiction. That'll be a heavy focus with inside, my segment. Talking, I'm very data led, so we'll be going over a lot of the data that we see, not only Masonically, but also from what I see with inside some of, the information that I get from industry. I'm very fortunate to have the client list that I've got with inside my firm, and the size and scale of clients that we have both in Texas and nationally and internationally. I've got some fairly interesting data for us to review.
Nice.
Specifically
Nice.
scope to Texas as far as like what you can expect to see out of who will be joining, Freemasonry in the future, because Texas over the next 20 years will not look like Texas looked like 20 years ago. And I said
Absolutely
this during,
not.
I said this during the membership committee report, not this last year, but the year before, with some high level, demographic statistics there, in how things are changing fairly rapidly. And will continue to do so. But we've got to make sure our membership is informed of that and aware, and is comfortable with the change. Right? It's easier to have change if it's coming, than to kind of wonder what's going on out in the dark. So those will be things that we talk about, in the conference coming up.
Something that I find really interesting about this business model approach is that it's not something new to Freemasonry. It's just new to many Freemasons. And the reason I say that is, and I alluded to this earlier, many lodges have very nice buildings, or at least they did at one time. These didn't come out of a vacuum. These were built by brothers who made smart financial decisions together to build these buildings. And many of these lodges for decades have been riding on the coattails of the wise financial decisions that these brothers made, and riding it into the ground, basically, until the lodge is falling apart and there's nothing left. But these are lodges with like zero balance bank accounts, no maintenance being done. So it's like there's this gap where we had these brothers that made these wise financial decisions and built something for it's the old analogy, planting trees for my children, not for me, right? They built these beautiful buildings for future generations of Masons. And
well, I think the first thing that, yes, I think the first thing that we lost was vision, right? Any successful company starts with a vision. You have to know what you're selling before you can sell it. You have to, know your audience before you can, commit to your audience. And we just simply have lost that vision. And while Freemasonry encompasses so many different aspects of people's lives, it still holds true to one aspect, and that is that the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of thought. Those three things are the basis of our fraternity, and it seems like we've lost that to some degree in the ranks, and it's almost as if you don't think my way, here's the highway, and that's a shame, because that's what you're seeing happen is brothers are coming in and then they're walking out, because they're just, especially today with the educated membership that we have coming in that have already done their due diligence before coming into the fraternity and knew what they were looking for, and based on historical data made the decision to join. And then today's doesn't reflect the same vision that we had back then, it seems. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think I mean, it's obvious that we're in, 6 or 7 decades of decline now. So anything that's happening today, is not necessarily the fault or the blame of anybody.
Right.
Today. Right. So for first and foremost, like, yeah, there are failing points that are continuing to happen. Some of them are systematic. The people who are continuing them, though, are largely just continuing on what they were taught is Masonry.
Yep.
And if you really want to, like, I'll put on my tinfoil hat if you really want me to divulge why I think that the United States and North America is uniquely in a position of demise when compared to the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
But
Let's go there.
Let's go down that rabbit hole. I think
Yes.
you hinted at this before, and I always wanted to follow up with you on this. So please, let's put on our tinfoil hats and go down that rabbit hole again.
Yeah, I mean, so this is all correlative, but if you look at, like, the history of the 20th century, Freemasonry, specifically in America, was just a booming economy of success for most of the time. I mean, it suffered the Depression like everybody else, but before the Depression, boom. After the Depression, boom. And what's funny is, you start to see a demise starting in 1963, just almost, consecutively across all the states and the national membership. This is not the same trend that happens globally. And if you look at, like, policies that went into place, I mean, you've got changing of monitors. The monitors, like, pretext, have very different notions around how to approach Masonry. We start getting into this kind of, like, demystification movement and almost like secularization of the fraternity, where you're trying to whitewash things and make it less mystic, like less eerie.
Oh yeah, 1926, the Morgan affair killed us. It really hurt our fraternity, and that whole generation after that was afraid to come out, per se.
Yeah. So the Morgan affair was like 1826. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what led to the first third party in America, right? The anti-Masonic party. But, like, that's
right.
We still had tons of success. There were still tons of, like, oh, who are the Freemasons, and people joined us. I think Robert Marshall has a presentation on the boom, of the early 20th century, in and around World War One. Membership slumped off after that, but not as bad as, like, the membership slump off after World War II. And here's where I put my tinfoil hat on, right? When you look at what the American government went through in World War II and the Allied governments went through in World War II, and seeing how Freemasonry was so effectively able to assist against, like, Nazi campaigns and things like that, able to, like, rise up against fascism, and it wasn't going to defeat fascism by itself, but it definitely provided lines of communication, secret communication, for people to continue on Freemasonry even after the Nazis took over, right, and so forth. So, anyways, you get out going into World War II. The stories I've always heard is Roosevelt was encouraging guys through fire chat radios to get into the fraternity before they went off to war. They were having, the ports in New York do 24-hour lodges on everybody getting on a ship.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons these membership numbers were going so far up, which could be in portion to the demise as well too. But the continued demise over the next 7 decades is very, like, systemic, right? We started changing the approach to Masonry after that. And if you look at, like, there's a book, if I remember right, I think it's called, like, the CIA Handbook, and it's based, I think it was declassified in the 70s or 80s, and it was how you basically take over a third world country, right? How you just destabilize it. If you read, like, a lot of their, like, top hit lists, it's like compartmentalize things, run things through committee, like obfuscate things, make it impossible to make decisions. And if you look at, like, the development in the Freemasonry in the United States in almost every jurisdiction since 1963. These are the types of policy we put in place. I mean, if you looked at Texas Grand Lodge law and you read this CIA handbook, you'd be like, am I reading the same book to some extent, or just an implementation of this book? So again, I mean, there's solid evidence to this, no, but if you're the United States government and you've just set up a central intelligence agency and just defeated, Nazi power, and now you're the sole, power in the world. I mean, we had the Soviets at the time, but I think going back through history now, I think that was not as much of a threat as what a lot of people built it up to be during the time, and was used more for global conquesting. You want to secure that base, and you don't want the largest fraternity that was at that time like a significant percentage of the American male populace to be able to have secret communications, clandestine communications, not Masonic clandestine, but true to the sense of like government and intelligence. You don't want those networks to exist. You don't want rogue agents and counter agents and foreign agents to be able to infiltrate those networks and utilize them. So it would be silly, like if I was in the CIA at that time, if I was director of the CIA at that time, to think that I wouldn't set up something to like mitigate the risk of what Freemasonry could become. Not saying they need to totally demise it, but put up things that would make it effective.
What's interesting is with what you're talking about, it sounds very familiar to what's happening in Cuba right now. Is I've heard stories that they're actually putting in sleeper agents, whatever you want to call them, into the lodges to spy on them, as well as to change policy for that very reason, to remove the threat of secret organization in Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, in many parts of the world, like Freemasonry is still a secret organization. Like throughout the Middle East and in parts of Africa, we get Hillcrest Lodge's website gets hit by people all over the world looking on how to join. And
we do too.
It's hard to believe that these countries don't have Masonic lodges at all. It's just that they're underground because they know they can't. That they'd be a threat if they are threatened if they surfaced.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, like you said, the ability for there to be an organization where men can meet in relative secret and have high level conversations could definitely feel threatening to governments. I mean, this is how the Revolutionary War was successful, was because of conversations at Masonic lodges.
Yeah, and so our position on that with inside, like how we've addressed the public, and I know your podcast goes out to anybody who can hear it. So if you're not a Mason and hearing this, like when we're talking about secret meetings, we're not worried about taking over the government. But again, if you've got a populace that size and that contentious of a like Cold War era, like it could definitely be misinterpreted. And the counter to that is the narrative we've provided the public is like, oh, don't worry about us. But when you say that, the guys who are most likely to want to join and get something out of it and really find meaning in it are going to say like, oh, I guess this isn't that important, right? So
we said we're the good old boys, and sure enough, now that's what we have is the good old boys. It's not high. Well, I don't want to go too deep into that one, but it's not where many people expect Freemasonry to be when they walk through the doors.
Yeah,
especially your young, educated men.
Yeah.
I think demographics change by area. That's, I wouldn't say anything's universally true, but
right.
I think that what you see on the History Channel, and the BBC and Grand Lodge, United Grand Lodge of England, and those type of things, that's a more selective experience that you're not going to find walking into just any lodge.
Yes. I would also put forth this just me thinking what we have described with organizations, and specifically with Freemasonry. We're living a very interesting time because there's foreign powers with a lot of influence in the United States, and I think we're still seeing so basically what we described in regards to Freemasonry was almost like a removal of its influence, in that it still exists, it's still there, you can still join, but it's a shadow of what it was. And the reason for this was for control and power. I would just throw out that I think that today, if you want to see this in action today, this is actually happening with men as a gender. Is that you have influences out there that are trying to remove the power from masculinity, and the reason I suggest that is that but who fights wars? It's the men traditionally. If you remove the power from the men in an entire culture, an entire country, they don't have the firepower they did anymore. And so that's kind of off on a tangent, but I think if you want to see a parallel of something that happened with Freemasonry on a different scale, I think that's kind of happening with men right now in our society.
Yeah. Did you happen to see Joe Rogan's YouTube short on men in war?
No, I don't think I have.
That just
I see a lot. I watch a lot of Joe Rogan
today. Yeah, popped up to my feed today on YouTube, and I was wondering if that's what put that thought in your head. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. I'm not sure one way or the other. I mean, men are the ones who have historically been in power most of the time through most civilizations. I'm not entirely sure if women were in charge of everything, if it would be entirely different. I've seen how my basically every woman I've ever been in a relationship with has had relations with other women, so I'm not necessarily positive we'd have less or more war that way. And in fact, I'm going to avoid stepping in that.
That's a big one right there. That's a big one.
I don't think it's a capability question. I think it's just, I think it's if you have two countries, right, historically, because things are different. Like we have way more technology with the way I mean, you could theoretically fight entire wars with drones and robots now. But historically, if you got two countries and somehow you found a way to emasculate the men, or blur that line, then suddenly your warriors, if you had this new mentality that being masculine was a bad thing, right? Then all of a sudden your warriors are no longer masculine. You know, they no longer seek the traits that traditionally would make you a strong and helpful warrior. Then if you could do that to the opposite side, it would make any future war much easier. I mean, sure, the people would still fight, but if you are downplaying the traits that you would seek for someone to protect and provide, then all of a sudden you have the upper hand.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at look at the gun control debate, right? I mean, if you can convince more and more people in any country to give up their arms or not, have private arms, you've got a populace that's willingly being put into a situation in which they're more likely to be forcibly taken over either internally or externally.
Right.
So, I mean,
yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, this is entirely theoretical. I'm not talking about any one government or populace, but
yeah,
that's just the way that it would work.
Well, if you have a country that is historically pro guns, and you try as you might, you cannot convince them to do away with your guns. Well, then you could just change the mentality on guns with even if it's the majority of the gun users. If you could change their mentality, you'll still have your redneck in the woods doing his thing, but less guns you have, or the less people willing to use guns you have, that's a huge advantage. Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's the important thing to think about. Like that type of mentality, like statistics and statistical relevance, like that's the mentality to have when we're talking about growth and business models and things like that. Because I talk about a lot of things online, and people on both sides of the aisle politically will call me a conspiracy theorist. but yet nobody ever talks about political strategy, right? And it's like we act like everybody's in Washington's, I guess, just like an idiot, or I don't know, but like,
yeah, we better have a strategy.
Well,
because they do.
Conspiracy is just another way to say strategy, right? You're generally not airing what your strategy is to the market, because if you did, you wouldn't have that strategic advantage, right? I mean, and so when we're looking at things online, like when I'm growing like an e-commerce site or when I'm growing a marketing channel, I'm not worried about you, and governments aren't worried about you, right? They're worried, and you know, in everything in between, corporations, everything else. Before I go too far on this, like, people are important, and we'll get to that. Like, that's a huge part of like the business model, but like building the model, it's not about any one person, right? It's about the numbers, and it's about understanding the behavioral patterns, and it's understanding like the levers you can pull and the blocks you can put in place to manipulate behavioral patterns to increase the net benefit of your business model, right? And so that's the way when I'm with, you know, a Fortune 50 company talking about, you know, how to increase their market share, or how to increase their revenue, I'm not talking about like any one person, and I'm not talking even about any one class of people. I'm talking about how to manipulate the entire market based on like conscious and subconscious behaviors, right? We know these things. If I don't know the answer to it, let's test both of them, or test like, you know, three patterns, see what yields out the best, go with the one that produces the best yield. And those are the mentalities that you have to grow. I mean, it's got to be like, you're not trying to change everything, you're not trying to burn the world, but you're identifying the levers you have, the levers you don't have, and really question it. You can't have any sacred cows, right? You've got to question the levers that you think that can't move, to make sure that there's not some of the biggest, you know, opportunities I found for my clients. Like, we just had a project wrap up, like one project, very small amount of people, you know, it netted over $250 million this year for them. Now they're a big company, but that's just like a small rollout with a small amount of budget. So, and the way that we were able to do that was basically slaughter all the sacred cows. All the things that the organization had in place that they're like, oh, we can't change that. We just kept asking why. Mm-hmm. And when we realized and had enough conversations that, well, you can change it if you have this model in place, and if it's going to generate like this type of revenue, and, you know, if it's going to, you know, whatever the strategic goal was, then it was like, oh yeah, well, let's test it out. And so, I mean, that $250 million was just a test. When we fully roll out, I fully expect like they'll net at least a couple billion annually.
Well, what's interesting about that is we have a lot of sacred cows in Freemasonry.
Article 1 through however many we have.
Yes.
But like you say, you have to be able to approach the situation and look at your options without bias, which is difficult, right? Because frankly, a lot of the options, if you look at what's probably going to be the most successful in most situations, there are going to be practices your lodge has not done.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
which is amazing.
You think about the models that got all the big stone buildings and all the downtown squares and everything else. Like, they were running, to your point earlier, they were running like business models to be able to do that. They had roles, responsibilities. You know, they were putting in their own money. They weren't asking the community for this stuff. And so, yeah, I kind of went off a tangent there, but yeah, I mean, ultimately we do have to start operating more like a business model. The problem is businesses change over time, and the needs of the businesses change over time. And we've codified almost all of our operations into law, which means it's almost impossible to change, which means we're never able to react and respond. We can't test things. Because of that, we continually demise. And so we've got to get to a point where we ultimately will shrink in membership. Here's my prediction. We'll get to a point where we shrink in membership so much that people will realize that the system's not working, and they can't rely on anything, there probably won't be enough left to worry about it if it gets to that critical mass failure. And we'll go through a great reformation movement. In Texas, probably in other states, maybe the entire country will do it, in which you basically, with one resolution or maybe a small series of resolutions over the course of 1 year, will demise most of your legal structure. Anything that's not essential to the protection of funds and assets of a building, and the core experience of the work would just be demised. Right. The stuff about, you can't have a fellow Kraus image on Facebook or something like that, which is completely an abstraction of law that's not applicable today and can't be really enforced. Gone. I mean, there's countless of those things. Those things will all just be gone, and then you'll just be left with like truly what are the sacred cows we've got to question, most of which probably we shouldn't touch, and then rebuilding the new model, but rebuilding it in a way where it's more flexible, right? So less of a legal structure and more of a recommendation structure, because frankly, Texas, I'm assuming this is probably because there's so much like intercommunication between like the higher ups of the states and how they all kind of coalesce to similar structures, some of the times at least. But Texas is too large to be governed in any one model. The right. Rural districts and the urban, like the inner city urban areas, will never operate successfully at the same time underneath the same model. That's why the model has to be at the Grand Lodge level as small as possible. Otherwise, the two will continue to demise. It's just which one's demising more than the other. And right now, it's just like, well, they're both continually demising over time because they're both putting laws on each other that are not helping the other one.
Yes. I would say, I agree. First of all, I agree. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where we've shrunk enough that and there's multiple reasons for that, right? But we'll have shrunk enough where we could actually say, hey, let's take a step back and reevaluate what works and what doesn't. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do between now and that point that are within the control of the lodge. It's just a matter of getting over that bias, like you're talking about. It's slaughtering those sacred cows, like keeping the dues low, and bringing people in as fast as they want to petition, and having cheap meals and things like that. These things that we put up on this pedestal that we always say it. It's the internal, not the external, and all the limitations that this mentality creates on us as an organization. We can change things in that regard, right? We can actually look at our operating costs and charge dues accordingly. We can actually create a process for bringing people into the lodge, aside from just being reactive and just voting as soon as we get a petition. These are things we could do now, which will help, I think, ultimately in the long run. But none of these things are going to be frank, there's a hole in our bucket, and it cannot be patched until the level's below the hole, right? If that makes sense. And so nothing we can do will stop that. But ultimately, when we get to that point, when the water levels below that hole, and we can finally patch it, the lodges that are still around to rebound at that point are going to be the lodges that have taken the right steps today. They're going to be the Hillcrest lodges, the Goliaths. They're going to be the lodges that stepped back and said, hey, we had to start making smart decisions now so that we are there 20, 30, 100 years from today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean,
what's amazing to me is that in the 1700s, when Freemasonry was taking shape, and even after the official formation of the Grand Lodge structure, Freemasonry was still pretty fluid, and they were still trying new things as they went and making it happen. And that's where all the genius came It wasn't from keeping your thumb on one specific way of doing things and frankly trying to ostracize anyone that doesn't think the same way as you. That wasn't the mentality then. And today we're in that mentality, and it's gone too far. The scary thing is who's gonna outlast the other in this demise of structure. That's the scary thing.
Yeah, this is like the conversation I've had with plenty of people in certain positions of power that are under different ways of thinking, or have been under different positions of power under different ways of thinking, which is like, I really don't care. Like, in all statistical likelihood, I will outlive you, right? And what I'm doing is building, and guys like me, not just me, but guys like me are building bigger, more successful operating models, than what they've built. And so those will hopefully outlast, regardless of if I'm here or not, right? And so ultimately, I have faith that keep fighting the good fight, and it'll come. But yeah, I mean, you see things happen not only in Texas but across the states where it's like, what is going on in this jurisdiction? What's going on in this appendant body? Things like that, and that's it. It spurs conversations where the guys who are running more successful operations start to have contingency plans, because at some point these things could spiral out of control and just significantly demise a jurisdiction. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility for it to have a schism where half the lodges leave a state, or a state doesn't recognize an appendant body anymore, or vice versa, or multiple states don't recognize other states. This country is becoming more polarized. It's generally split in the states, and that will likely impact Freemasonry one way or another as our membership shrinks and as our polarity becomes more divided in our membership as well too.
Well, we're already divided, at least here in Texas.
Well, for sure, yeah, and across the states too. I mean, you can't get on different Facebook groups put on by different podcasters or whoever else, all having meaningful conversation, but those conversations are moderated and approached in completely different ways, right? Like,
yes,
there's groups that just won't allow the type of freedom of voice and conversation that you have in Texas Freemasons. Now, that being said, Texas Freemasons is also notorious for having some of the most hellfire, stirring the pot conversations you can have and things like that. But we just take a almost absolutionist approach that we're just not going to moderate unless it violates a very few and select amount of laws. And if anybody's doing anything wrong legally, we generally leave it up so that way somebody can bring charges against somebody else.
Well, Dennis and I have practiced quite a bit of moderation this year, so I don't know if there's no moderation, but it's definitely well placed moderation, I think.
Yeah. And it's a shame that we have to think that way. It's one thing if we were saying things that were downright false, downright tacky, or just crude to the general public. But it's not. We're discussing true happenings that we feel are unjust, and as Freemasons we're taught to be just and discuss those things, but yet we're not allowed to without fear of retaliation. I get texts while I'm talking online saying different things like peace and harmony, and are you sure you want to talk about that? Right. Things like that. And it's like, really? You're watching just to moderate what I'm saying, just to tell me that I should be, it, that's not the way I envisioned Freemasonry when I joined. I always thought that it was, grown men, civilized men discussing the hardest topics of the day and walking away brothers. That's how I've always thought of it. I mean, even
Yeah,
if we
that's the way it's
disagree,
advertised to me.
yes, and even if
we don't
disagree,
advertise,
I
but the
love
world
it.
advertises. And if anybody doesn't know, the United Grand Lodge of England does advertise. I mean, all those history shows and BBC shows and Discovery shows and everything else that came out, 15, 20 years ago. I think the two biggest proponents of those were probably the United Grand Lodge of England and the Southern Council of the Scottish Rite. I mean, they were on every single one of those things, talking about anything that could possibly get guys in the door, and that set the tone. Like whatever they said set the tone for this generation of Masons. And I mean, there's guys probably watching this today that have never seen those shows, and what they've been taught about Freemasonry has been impacted by the guys who joined 10 or 15, 20 years ago, who saw those shows, who like that was their early formation. Like the dark lodge rooms, the checkered pavement floors that have been recently remodeled, including Hillcrest. Like these really didn't exist in America outside of Grand Lodge buildings and maybe some temples. 15 years ago, and now you see more and more like, hey, we just remodeled our lodge and it actually looks like a lodge and stuff like that. So
Yes.
I think
it looks like a temple. We need to get away from calling them lodges and go back to calling them temples.
Well, and so for it, there's some nuance with that. At least the way I understand it, I think a temple is more than just a lodge. At least with inside like the York Rite system that we largely emerged out of in Texas. I could be completely wrong on that, though. I'm going to throw that out there. So we won't go down that rabbit hole. But I don't want to say like, hey, you've got to have like a multi-million-dollar building with like marble and granite everywhere and things like that. But try to have something towards that looks more like something of antiquity. Like some of the coolest lodges I've seen are these old country lodges that don't even have a road out to them. You got to like take your Jeep out on or something, and really off the beaten path. I think some of them don't have electricity running to them. That's cool, right? That's something of antiquity, like candlelight lodges.
Yes, they're impactful.
Yeah,
they're
providing that atmosphere, and they're taking you back in time to experience this historic kind of philosophy that we kind of take in and live. And I think having it not look like it's been remodeled to look like a 1970s Baptist church is a good thing.
Yeah, that's not the temple I was thinking. I was talking about a temple.
I think if you can look at your lodge and it looks exactly like every other lodge building in your jurisdiction, that's your number one reason why you're not attracting people, because you don't have anything that makes you stand out. You don't have anything that makes you unique. And like you said, it's there's not really like a set way to do it, but I think definitely looking at it from an outsider's perspective. If I was coming to this building for the first time, is it cool? Is this something I'd want to be? Is this something that I'd be excited to be a part of? And if the answer is not yes, fix that. Make it so. What would be cool? I mean, again, Hillcrest, not trying to inflate your ego or anything, but Hillcrest is amazing. Like Hillcrest has so many good things going for it, and the attention to detail is like I remember I was sitting there at your lodge, and I saw the bookshelf behind the secretary's desk open up. And I realized that was a door. I was like, well, that's what from the outside looking in, you would probably expect a Masonic lodge to have a secret door somewhere, right? And so like you got so many good things going on. And
if not a secret door to get into the lodge.
Yeah. Well, so my point is
it's not a secret anymore, Justin.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, if nothing else, go to one of these lodges. and see how they're doing things and get inspiration. Because
and take people with.
yes,
Or better
yes,
yet,
yes.
come to the conference and we'll show you how we do it.
There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
Even better. Yes. Come to the conference and we'll show it. Because this is something I think is growing, this mentality. Hey, let's make our lodge something we can be proud of, something that's beautiful and inspirational. However, like was also pointed out, if I just go by myself and I come back to my lodge and I'm like, hey, we got to put some LEDs around the checker payment. We got to make this bad boy look. We got to make it pop. No one's sold on this because they haven't seen it. It's the same thing with like going to like officer leadership training or this conference, the Masonic Improvement Summit. If you're the only one from your lodge that goes and you come back with all these great ideas, I mean, that's great. You've grown, but you have to sell everyone else on it. And the easiest way to do that is to get them all there.
Yeah, I will say that too to the audience. You know, there are some guys from Hillcrest who recently went to another one of these types of conventions, summits in another state, more esoterically focused, I think.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. And like, we didn't have full communication and membership on it. And they came back and they're like, oh, we got to do this as a group next year. And we were like, yeah, it would have been great to know about this. So yeah, I mean, if you're coming, come on. Glad to have you. You're definitely going to learn some things and take it back. But I will say it's going to be like Plato's Cave if nobody else from your lodge comes, right? So like you will learn things maybe so outside of the box from how the rest of your membership thinks about things. When you take it back, it could feel like it's falling on deaf ears. So if you get like a couple guys to come with you, come as a group, get multiple guys from your lodge to go, you know, they'll all kind of have the same experience and start learning, you know, the same statistics that we talk about. I'll be talking a lot about data as far as like, you know, membership and how people think through like online processes and how they convert into actions and things like that. So that level of information, you don't want to have to take that back and communicate that on your own. It'd be good to have like a group of guys who all got it and they're like, oh yeah, these are the things they talked about and all that. So
yes, and not just your lodge, but your district. You know, it makes a difference because you have, you know, we're all visiting each other in our different lodges within the districts and things of that nature. And, you know, there's nothing worse than having one decent lodge in a district and everyone else shunning that idea. That it really makes it hard. It's just like having just one person from a lodge go. You know, if we're going to make a difference and we're going to be inspirational leaders, we need to have other inspirational leaders we can count on that we can talk about these things with and bounce ideas off of, because we're not officer leadership training. We're just inspiring you to become the best leader that you can be within your lodge structure. And if you don't have other like-minded individuals around you to where, you know, you can gain some kind of momentum in your thoughts and plans and ideas, and gain that support, then it's going to be hard. So, you know, you bring up a good point. You should come 2 or 3 at a time. You should have extra people in your district coming around to see it as well. And not only that, but it's those moments that you share. You've got all this education that you're going to get. You've got the festive board that you're going to have. And then you have a master's degree on the Lexington. I mean, those are all shared moments that you'll never have taken away from you. And those are the ones that actually strengthen your bonds. Mm-hmm. And more so than anything else, sitting on the beach and at the hotel afterwards and just talking Freemasonry. Yeah. Now that is worth its weight in gold. And not only with people around Texas, but people in other grand jurisdictions are coming as well. So you want to know how Justin and I have met the people that we've met and how we've become close friends with people like Kyle and these other leaders that are coming to give these discussions. This is how it's those shared moments together that we realize that, man, we're on the same journey here. We're not running in parallel. We're on the same journey. That's priceless, man. That's
I was thinking, it's a science teacher in me, because we spoke a lot about momentum, right? So momentum actually has a scientific formula, and that's mass times velocity, right? And velocity is speed or movement with a direction, right? But you have to have, the more mass you have, the more momentum you have. That mass is the people you bring with you. Like if you just go to a Masonic event and you come back and you're super charged up, that's one person with momentum. But the more people you bring, the more people that are sold on an idea, the more mass you bring to that, and the more momentum you have, and the harder it is to stop. Because momentum, once you get going, it's hard to stop. So you need those people. You need that momentum. You need that mass. So that's why it's important to attend these things and bring people with you, because then you all came back. You're all sold. You all the same idea, and you all together have momentum together, and that's going to shape the direction of your lodge. Because as was pointed out earlier, a lot of Masons mean well, but all they know is what they were taught. Yep. They're a product of their raising, right? Their Masonic raising. They're a product of that. They don't know anything besides that, right? And so while a lot of these guys will probably be open to ideas, they have to be exposed to it. And there's two ways to do it. You either get them to these kind of events, or you come back with so much momentum and so many people sold on the idea that they're convinced. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The thought of momentum and kind of growth modeling reminds me. I've been working on a way to convey kind of maturity and growth, and I equate it to like energy, right? So like the energy side of it. And so you start with like a campfire. It's like your base form of energy. You're throwing logs on it all the time. It's not scalable, right? You're going to produce enough heat for yourself, maybe a few other people. Then you think about like the Industrial Revolution. You've got like coal plants, and you're just like, funneling coal. You're making a lot more energy, but it still only takes you so far. Then you've got nuclear fission, in which you are basically creating magnitudes more energy, but it still requires more input than you get output, right? So there's still waste involved. Mm-hmm. And ultimately where we want to get to with inside a lot of, marketing models and growth models that I'm developing is how do we get to like the nuclear fusion model, right? Where we're actually self-generating energy. So taking everything that you do and continually looping it into building on the next step. And the next step always loops back around to the start again. And then you build a new cycle. And every cycle should be bigger. The only way that works, though, is if you're creating a like member first experience. Without a member first experience and without like making sure that everything, and I'm not saying take in anybody and make a member out of anybody, but the people that you've identified that are the right fit for your lodge and your lodge's culture, like you should be fully invested into them as a man, as a person, as a member, as a Mason.
Almost like a mentorship program, right?
Well, that's part of it. That is definitely part of it. But yes, like their entire experience should take them out of their cycle of coming into the fraternity and immediately want to learn how to do the cycles and go into the next cycle with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so every time you're doing that, you should be multiplying. When we started, when I came to Hillcrest in 2006, Elmer Murphy, past Grandmaster Elmer Murphy, it was his like year out of office in the Grand East. We had like generally 11 to 14 guys at any meeting, including stated meetings. We did like maybe 2 or 3 degrees a year, maybe. Mine and somebody who came before the week before me were 2 of those 3 my first year. So I mean, it was a fairly average lodge for all things considered, and in terms of like what I would deem performance. What we'll talk about at this conference and the growth model that we built starting in like 2010, it requires an immense amount of guys to operate at like full steam, full momentum, to to the point where, we're 10 years into it, 12 years, 13 years into it. And I mean, we've still got room to grow, right? And we've identified those areas of growth. But the cycles that we build have attracted so many guys who are continuing to add to it, where you are seeing like exponential growth, with the exception of the pandemic.
Yes.
If the pandemic hadn't happened, I mean, Hillcrest would probably have another 50 guys in it right now, than what we have today. And we blackball pretty frequently. So don't think like, hey, we're just giving away petitions and everybody's coming in. Come to the conference, you learn how like stringent it is, and the psychological effects that has to get guys to convert and be dedicated members, because we don't want to just waste time on guys who aren't going to be serious about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that entire, membership focused experience is core of creating that like continual purpose. Because I can guarantee you, in any lodge in Texas and any lodge in the United States, there's more work to be done than there's being done today, and there's more work to be done than there are members in that lodge, at least active members in that lodge. And so you have to figure out how to create a culture of mentorship and brotherhood and fraternity that will attract guys to want to build it with you. You can't do it all yourself. And if you're trying, if you or somebody in your lodge is trying to be the guy with the big stick, I know everything, and you're going to kill your lodge.
And you're also depriving your upcoming leadership opportunities to grow by doing that.
Yeah.
When you talk about cycles, are you referring to like policies and procedures that are in place and just constantly reevaluating that, or do you mean something bigger?
Yeah, no, I don't want to give too much away, but it's not policies and procedures. It's actual phases of membership growth. So we did an assessment. We identified 6 major tiers or 6 major columns that needed to get done across lodge administration and operations to be successful. And of those 6 columns, there are multiple committees, or however you want to formulate it and structure it, with inside those. So there's a lot of work to happen. I mean, an ideal state, you'd have 25 to 35 guys in any given lodge, heavily active and heavily contributing to these activities. Of course, you can have guys double up on some of these things with smaller amounts of active membership, and the models can look different. It doesn't need to be prescribed universally, but that's what in an ideal state, what it would probably look like. We're not there yet.
In fact, that's really what it would require to begin, right? It does take those 10 dedicated people to take on 3 or 4 different hats to make sure and be committed to the point that you're not going to try it for a few months and then say, oh, this just didn't work, and I'm spending too much time away from this and this and this. It's got to be a commitment until you can relieve that pressure by having the progress of the goal take the place of those other hats. Yeah. So basically your membership becomes the support structure that relieves you of that stress and makes it a little bit easier.
If you're a lodge trying to recover, right? So you got like 20 active guys. It has to be scalable, like you guys are saying. It can't be, well, we only got 20 people showing up. I guess we're just screwed. We can't do any of this. It's got to be scaled to your lodge.
Yeah, definitely has to be scaled to your lodge. Gonna say something in response to Dennis a second ago. Dennis, give me the synopsis of what you just said.
That basically you're training your replacement as you implement the structure. It brings in the replacement to relieve your load.
There's a really good book by somebody that I've forgotten who it is. John, somebody maybe. I'll see if I can find it. But we'll talk about it at the conference. But he's got a thing like that's the 5 levels of leadership, right? And a low level of leadership is, hey, you've inherited a title. Yeah. So this is meant for like professional, analysis, but it very much applies to Masonry, right? The lowest level is, hey, you got promoted, you got a title, people have to, work for you now. But that is not in any way, shape, or form a true leader, right? Ultimately, you've got people, you're really good at what you did, and people identify that and want to learn from you. You've got people willingly learning from you and willing letting you teach them how to lead other people in those task-based traits. Then you've got up to levels in which it's like you're really just mentoring the people rather than the roles and responsibilities. You still know everything down below it. The point of that, though, is in Masonry, I feel like too many maybe don't have the experience of like higher levels of leadership outside of Masonry, but they get in and they hold a title, and then the title's got like, oh, it's my role and responsibility, and that's what I want to do. That is not a level of success to what anybody should be measuring themselves to. The level, that is a very low bar. And for anybody who's held like higher responsibilities with inside like, professional life, this is why, frankly, you get a lot of guys who just like burn out and turn off because they run into these lower level leaders and they're just like, I'm not going to put up with your shit, to put it bluntly. Or I don't have time to worry about you not knowing what you're doing, and they're not going to tell you that to your face. Yeah. Ultimately, though, the point of that dialogue is you should be aiming, no matter where you're at in Masonry, to yes, lean in, contribute, become a leader that people want to work under, become a leader that people, can succeed in their own capacity, and then become a leader that can be so successful that you can step aside and let other people do it. Because if you can't get to that point, like you're not really succeeding as a leader.
Exactly. Just joining 5 lodges and becoming secretary does not make you a leader. That just makes a plural member that's, doing all this work and trying to.
And that lowest level,
down.
like you're talking about, we see that a lot. And that's a lodge killer in many cases.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm the worship master, because we kind of tell them that you're the worship master. People pretty much have to, you rule and govern the lodge, and there's no nothing, no one in the lodge higher than you. You have absolute say, and they take that along with this. Hey, I just got this position, and I can just do whatever I want, and you could have 10 years of successful leadership, and then you have one guy like that step into your leadership, and the lodge is dead. All that work is undone in a very short amount.
Well, and that's why I brought up the secretary, because many times, the master is there for 1 year. He's got his 1 year, but the secretary is there multiple years and a lot of people tend to consider that person the actual, person that does the work of the lodge, that makes it happen for the lodge. And that's not the case, and it shouldn't be the case. But, that's the mentality, and that's the person with the most impactful, the most impact in the lodge, and yet that's the person that's just doing a role of responsibility. And that's a killer.
I think that what you're describing, what we're talking about, is the initial intent of probably the progressive line, in that it gives, it's not a matter of someone earning their stripes. It's there, and it's a lengthy period. We're looking like 7 years if you just do 1 year in every role. The intent is, in my belief, is this intentionally grow this person over this course of time, so that when he does step into the East, he's a leader. However, if he doesn't step up, or if he's not leadership material, he doesn't go past a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
on the progressive line, I'm not a huge fan, if that doesn't surprise anybody. I would encourage, if you've got like everything, but like once it gets to elected position, I'm fine with that, right? Like the wardens and the master. But you should obviously hopefully have a lodge membership capacity that's deep enough to then have guys be able to float around with inside appointed offices, the lower offices, and you don't have to have like a clear-cut line there. I think it's actually better to have a little bit of ambiguity there and discernment between master and master. Be like, oh, I want you to try to do this for a year. Oh, I want you to try to do this for a year, and then get them to float around without like, hey, the next position you're going to get elected, right? It's like, no, it's like, okay, well, and then maybe you get at a point where you have like runoffs or whatever, but which I think is healthy. I think competition for election is healthy, and
I agree.
Absolutely. And that's what
like
frustrates me.
5 or 6 people elected
lodges that
at the last minute, nominated at last minute. That's real good.
Yeah, but one thing I wanted to say on the point of, you guys gave out the position of the secretary. It could be anybody, it could be a worshipful master, but like if you've got somebody who's just like, building this big stick of like the way to do it, and you can't not do it any way, that is antithesis to this culture of membership and mentorship, which ultimately that breaks that continuous growth loop, right? Because like eventually you're going to wear guys down to where it's like maybe existing guys don't want to go through the loop anymore because they're having to deal with this baggage over here, or you get new guys in and they're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I mean, you could get new guys in who are more experienced in leadership and management than everybody else within inside your lodge. You need to be prepared for that, right? Like you should be looking for people to join who are more successful than everybody else. We want to continually raise the bar as an organization.
Yeah. You're not growing if you're the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, any opportunity you give for guys to like have friction with that growth loop to where it's like, oh, this is just not worth it. This guy's not fun. Like, it doesn't have to be fun, but it's just like, it's not good to work with. He doesn't know what he's doing. He thinks he knows everything, that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's going to ultimately break that growth loop. And what happens is you can see it time and time again. Lodges will generally start growing. They'll be like, oh, light bulb, they'll get it. They'll start growing and they'll last that growth model for like 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
And then they start to lose membership through either they haven't created a common culture and now there's like factions competing, or there's an old faction that's like not with the growth and they're like basically churning people off of the growth model because they're unwilling to grow as an individual and as a group. Or the factions become so materialized that the lodge schisms.
Yes.
So, I mean, ultimately, that's the biggest problem is not having this culture in many lodges, which is why you see lodges, maybe they hit a peak of growth for a few years, but fade off. You generally don't hear about lodges that have been growing consistently for 10 or 15 years at a time.
Yeah, right. I got 2 points to that. And first of all, I'll say I made videos speaking out against progressive line in the past, and I stand by what I said. I'm not, for clarity's sake, it's not that I'm not a fan of progressive lines. I'm not a fan of progressive lines in the way that they're implemented in most lodges.
Traditionally.
Right. Traditionally. If you put someone in junior deacon, and then in a few years they magically pop out as a warden with no thought. You just put them on the conveyor belt and turn around, do your thing, and come back and they're a warden all of a sudden. That's not healthy for the lodge. But I mean, and what you're talking about is I think kind of ultimately what I would imagine is if someone is not suitable for this, say they get to senior deacon, you're like, yeah, I don't know, this is for you. I got somewhere else for you. Or let's take this guy and let's put him here because I think this is where he's at. So you have to be fluid with it, but you have to be intentional. You can't just set him in the line and just let the years go by and all of a sudden he's the worshipful master, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And each spot should be an opportunity for that individual to grow. And ideally, you've got someone in the lodge who understands the opportunities for each guy, right? Like they've got enough experience to say like, oh, this guy could learn from this position. And I'm not talking about how to set a menu and cook in a kitchen, right? Yeah. It's like this guy could, pick up this trait of leadership from this position or whatnot.
And as far as talk about, let me get this point real quick, Dennis.
Go ahead.
I'll forget. As far as the point about factions, I think that goes back to being intentional about your investigation processes and everything. Because if you are a education lodge and say, hey, this is what we focus on. We focus on education. We bring speakers in. We have good meals. We have a great time. And then you start bringing people in that, hey, I really think we should be raising money, doing fundraisers and stuff. There are lodges out there that are successful in their own right doing that. Mm-hmm. If I am investigating somebody and my lodge is educational focus, and you have someone coming in that wants to just hit fundraising really hard, I should be willing to say, hey, we don't really focus on that here, but this lodge in the next town over, that's their thing. You probably would get more bang for your buck if you go there. And it's not being rude. You're actually doing them if you just bring him into your lodge, you're doing you and your lodge and him a disservice, because he's not what he's looking for.
Yeah, that's exactly the way that we do it as well too. Like we do try to operate with inside of like a big tent mentality, right? So again, not to shamelessly plug too much, but in the conference, you will see like basically all the different parties of Masonry, or the different interests that guys could come in for, are represented with inside that 6-pillar multi-committee model of growth. But you should understand like the focus of your lodge and the prioritization of it. And I've had guys say, hey, I'm they've come to a few happy hours, got to know them, the great, submitted a petition, we're at investigation, and then they're like, hey, I'm really into charity, or think we should do a lot of charity, to your example. And it's like, hey, we do some of that, but I'm going to be transparent with you right now, that's not our main focus. And if you want to lead that for us and try to grow that here as well, you can do that, but just know that not everybody's going to be chasing that same apple, right? And if you want to get in with guys who that's all they want to do, I can refer you to 2 or 3 other lodges, within a 10-mile radius that
there'll be a place for it, but it's never going to be the primary focus here.
Well, that's why you have the brothers that are complaining of people joining and then going off to the Scottish Rite, or to the shrine, or to whatever appendant body, because they come in for one thing thinking that that's what they're going to get there, and then but it's all because the investigation isn't a discussion. Yeah. We go by the list of questions, and if they check all the boxes, then it's done. They're approved. But instead, it should be an actual discussion that you're having, understanding the person, which I don't want to give away what y'all do in your process, but your beginning process takes away all of that concern for me, because in that situation where they're invited to that setting, people are going to let down their guards. They're going to, you're going to get to know people in that setting before it ever gets to that point. So I think that those discussions are real important. Yeah. What I was going to say earlier, though, is that what makes me ill are the lodges that do away with positions within the structure. Not that I agree with going, in the progressive line traditionally, but not having the stewards, not having the Tyler, not having those as options for people to do when they come into the lodge, because some people need a dose of servanthood. Some people need to be taken off their pedestal and to understand that we're serving each other, we're serving God, we're, some people need to learn how to care about what they're a part of and guard the West Gate, and be that Tyler. I think that there's a valid place for every position, and I don't think that taking those away in the lodge, or having one set of people do that all the time every year, is the right thing to do. Yeah. I think that there should be opportunity for all the people that come in to be able to experience those different things, because I don't think and I think this was the idea of the progressive life, if you don't understand those basic points of service to your fraternity, then when you get up to a higher position, it becomes more of a do as I say, not as I do type mentality, and it's not. I don't know. It just seems to.
Well,
there's a breakdown there. In my opinion.
Yeah, there's a kind of conundrum with where we're at, and tying into earlier conversation we had just around like, this event horizon line that we'll eventually cross. And you got to understand, like, it won't all happen at the same time for all or most lodges, right? And in fact, when you look at the numbers, and I promise at the conference we'll stay on a positive note and talk about growth and growth opportunities. But when you look at the numbers, Lance Kennedy did some really good studies with membership data and some data scientists. And, I think conservatively, it's like 40% of the lodges today operating are what we would probably classify as dead.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's impossible for them to recover, but it is statistically unlikely for them to be able to recover, at least with inside the current system of lodge structure. And so, we're either at a point where for that 40% or more, because again, that's a conservative number, that they are just dead and on the voting rosters of Grand Lodge and doing things for financial contributions to Grand Lodge, or we've got to hit like a point in which we radically transform sooner than later to save them.
And I'm going to say this as a dual member of some lodges, but I think it's dual memberships that are keeping these lodges on life support.
Oh, for sure.
This
Without
event horizon, which like you said, is not like one day you wake up and everything's changed, but this event has been put off probably by decades because of these endowed members. I mean, because of the dual memberships.
Well, yeah, that goes back to like the beginning of this conversation. The late 20th century, policies were put in place that systematically changed the structure of the state. We put off having hard conversations that would allow us to grow as a state and more healthy lodges to succeed by putting in things that would prolong having healthy, productive conversations and ultimately keeping lodges on life support and almost disguising them. When you've got, because so for one example of that is the endowments. And I know guys are like, well, I'll take the $6,000 a year. And it's like, you are losing so much money. There are models in which endowments do work underneath the funds that they're taking today, but it's generally when your membership is much higher in age joining than what we're seeing coming into the fraternity today. When endowments sounded like a great idea, when the average age of guy joining was retirement, so 60, 65, 70, he had probably on average 10 to 15 years to live. He's going to spend, his days, participating in lodge. He'd endow, and then the lodge would get money after that.
Yep.
Well, and that
policy was about joining is south of 45.
Right.
That $500 is never going to recoup the difference that dues paying member would have. So that's policy number one that happened in the late 20th century that we've inherited, not us, not even our jurisdiction, but the generation before us inherited as normal operating procedure, and they're taking it and running with it. Two is the plural membership, among many, many others. But yeah, when you take the dedication it requires of a mass amount of men to form these growth loops, like continuous growth loops, and then you say, hey, we're going to take this one guy and spread him out over 3 to 5 lodges to keep them all alive, you've invalidated any potential return you could have of your membership to actually build the growth model. And
let's create from a Grand Lodge level.
You do have a decline.
Let's create from a Grand Lodge level, because now instead of getting per capita just off one guy at one lodge, I mean, I effectively doubled or tripled how much I'm getting off of him. So from a top-down perspective, it looks great. But yeah, it's exactly like you're saying. I mean,
it's funny how that works, huh?
Yeah, it's strange how that works.
Yeah, it's almost as if somebody should speak against it.
Yeah.
Well, we won't get too far into that because there's so many surprises left, so many activities.
I don't want to get censored.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I don't want to be censored or relieved of my duties as a past master of the
Yeah.
Grant Lodge of Texas.
So I think at this point, it's good a time as ever. If you've been listening to the entire episode, you probably have deduced already, but officially, just so there's no ambiguity, Kyle will be speaking at the Masonic Improvement Building a Better Brotherhood Summit as our keynote speaker. And if this conversation has not piqued your interest, then I don't know what to tell you, man, because I'm really looking forward to what he's going to present. All the little, you can tell this guy's an expert at marketing because all the little teasers that he's putting in here really got me wanting to hear the whole thing.
Oh yeah, and that was just on the fly. He comes on the show. What are we going to talk about? And then he just throws this out. It's like, oh my God, it would have taken me a month just to come up with that. So, as I say a million times, and I'll say it a million more, I am so excited just to be. I'm going to be a participant of the summit. We're not talking in this. Justin and I aren't talking. We'll throw a little few things out, but we're not talking on any specifics. So
I'll throw a few little things out. I want
we just get to talk. Exactly.
Well,
we're going to get to sit and listen.
Real quick, I do want to I'm going to share this with you two, but really for the audience. So this discussion was really impromptu and really on the fly for me. And to share with you two in particular how impromptu it was. When you sent over an invite for an interview, I thought I was interviewing if I was going to be speaking at the summit. Not so when you guys were like suiting up and like, okay, well, let's press record. I'm like, what are we doing?
That's why you're like, are we going to be recording this? I was like, yeah, we're going to record it.
Yeah. So, but
absolutely,
yeah, I'm super pumped about it. I hope we get a bunch of guys out there. Look forward to sharing a bunch of information with you guys. Hopefully, able to help some of your lodges grow from that. I've been asked many times over the past few years by Grand Lodge officials and everything if I could kind of tour the state and give this kind of presentation, which I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old at home, so the past few years have not been good. This has really been kind of the first opportunity that's presented itself where the stars aligned, and I could not be more thrilled to do it with you two guys and the group of brothers that you're bringing together for this.
Yes, it's
awesome.
It's going to be a fantastic event, and so we're very excited to have you. As soon as Dennis told me that you're coming keynoting, it's going to be fantastic. So yeah, this is going to be. I say it every time, but this is going to be something where if you miss out, you're really missing out, because this is going to be on a whole new level. But we got some great events in Texas, but I think this is going to be up there.
Well, it's going to live true to the name, and it's inspirational leadership. Building a better brotherhood through inspirational leadership, and that's what this summit's all about. And so everything that we're doing is intentional to build those bonds, and so that you not only get to visit with us and all of our speakers throughout the weekend, but you'll make those connections later on. So when you see them and you say, hey, I'm trying this, what am I doing wrong here? And you'll be able to talk to them in the future as well. That's what it's all about, helping each other to get through this thing. And not just through this thing of Freemasonry, but through this thing of life. And so as you meet other leaders with similar interests and the same goals that you have, that's where you grow personally exponentially, in my opinion. It's when you really start putting turning your fire into fusion. That's a good one. Turning your fire into fusion. That's a good title. I'm gonna have to remember that one.
You used a word that I really like also, because this is a Master Masons only event, right? We'll all be Masons.
Yes.
But you used a very good word. You'll be running into other leaders. We'll all be Master Masons, but not all Master Masons are leaders. This will be an event for leaders. This is a leadership event. And whether you're going there with that intention or not, by going to this, you're a leader in Texas Freemasonry. So it's really gonna elevate your whole Masonic practice.
Yeah, just adding to that again, back to those 5 levels of leadership. Like, if you're not a leader today, you may be a leader walking out of it. If you're a lower level leader, you may gain some insights to get to level up your leadership ability.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I love it.
Level up.
Great. All right. Well, Kyle, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to add as we wrap this up?
Well, I think we really kind of already took the wind out of the sails and the thunder here, but I'm really excited. Really excited to be a part of this, and looking forward to seeing everybody down there, both during the sessions and after hours as well. I'm sure we're going to have some great fraternal brotherhood.
Absolutely.
And yeah, if you have
Plenty of it
already, make sure to do it.
Yes, sir. Dennis, you got anything you want to add?
I'm just stoked. I'm absolutely excited, impressed with the level of brothers who decided to take time out of their weekend, out of their lives to come down and to help the brothers of Texas and beyond. You know, we've got people coming. We've got more people coming from Arkansas than Texas right now, I think, because they're just coming in by the crows. Same way with New Mexico. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. It's all these brothers coming together for the common good of Freemasonry and brotherhood and fraternity, and it's really going to be an impactful event. I truly believe that.
Love it, man. All right, well, that's all I got too. I mean, I already said shot. I already said what I had to say. We'll
oh my goodness!
Yeah,
let's leave it there.
That didn't come out right. But
now that we all into the dark.
But anyway,
on that one.
Kyle and Dennis, if y'all just hang tight after we wrap this up, I want to ask something real quick. But thanks to everybody for tuning in, and really excited about what's coming up. And I'll see y'all on the next episode.
Keep it between the points, brothers.